This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah.
Do you mind?
I think I have another thing on this side. Well, I just dial in remote.
All right. Ooh, boy, if you swing it one way, you hit it. Rick, do we have a quorum?
1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, we do.
Awesome. Okay, let me find my pen. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. So we welcome everybody here in the room. Let's see. We have Commissioner Lojinos Gonzalez. Why am I forgetting your name? Mayor Dennis Carpenter. Sorry, Mayor John and Roland Gardine from Calhan, and several representatives there in the audience, and Gail and Jennifer, Andy, Rick, and Jennifer Ivy. And online, we have City Councilman Wayne Williams, City Councilwoman Yolanda Avila, and Mayor Jane Newberry, and Commissioner Carrie Geithner. Thank you. Someone said she's underlining this right here. I appreciate the assist. All right, so the meeting's called to order. Our first item is the approval of the agenda.
Yolanda, move to approve the agenda.
I'll second John Graham.
All right, there's a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Our next item is public comment period for items not on the agenda. Is there any member of the public, either virtually or in the room, who would like to speak about an item? Okay, hearing none. The next item is number 4, approval of the minutes from the January 12th, 2022 meeting. If everyone's had a chance to read those. Okay. And I can have a motion to approve the minutes.
Chair, I'll make the motion. Randy Helms.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. So that passes. Oh, did anyone want to say no? Okay, no opposed. Citizens Advisory Committee monthly report. And this month, Vice Chair Larry Tobias is going to report to us.
How's everyone this afternoon? Good. Citizens Advisory Committee met, and I'll just go over all the items. Public comments, there were none, either online or during the meeting from anyone that was attending. Financial reports, information only was given to us by Bev, and she did an overview, and you'll see that is actually an updated financial report today. City of Colorado Springs contracts approved a positive recommendation for the 8 contracts as presented to the CAC by Gail. El Paso County contracts approved a positive recommendation for the 1 contract as presented to the CAG. As it turned out, Jennifer had a emergency meeting, so she wasn't there. As chairman of the HAC, the El Paso County Highway Advisory Commission, I gave the presentation on that particular item and asked for approval and got a unanimous approval for that. PPRTA contracts for engineering cost estimates. That was approved. Colorado Springs is looking at 3 contracts. The El Paso County is looking at 1 contract to get cost estimates on PPRTA 3 projects. City of Colorado Springs Transit Service monthly update was given. City of Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition report was also given. Maintenance of effort reports. Approved a positive recommendation for all 6-member governments reports being in compliance with the maintenance of effort provision. PPRTA member governments use of 2021 budget amendment funds. This was an information item only, but each one of the entities did give us a copy of what they have done with those funds. Report of recent board actions. This was information only. Revision to the CAC bylaws for the town of Calhan. By a vote of 13-2, approved a positive recommendation for CAC reorganization option number 1 from the CTAB. That is what we recommended. You will also have a discussion today on this item 2. Draft comprehensive IGA with the town of Calhan. Approved a positive recommendation for the draft IGA as presented to the CAC. Agenda items for the next meeting, there were none. Communications, both Gail and Jennifer gave updates to the committee on the development of their respective capital project lists for PPRTA 3 ballot measures. And they're digitally working on those, and hopefully in the next month or so, we'll see the list from those 2 organizations as the first draft. Any questions?
Are there any questions for the Citizens Advisory Committee?
I do, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Larry, was there any, when the discussion of the list of projects for the PPRTA matrix, and we can ask Gail and Jennifer later, maybe, have they been listed out like 1 through a million or not yet? Did that come up?
They,
in the
as
CAC?
Gail and Jennifer both indicated, they are in a development phase.
Okay, all right. That's what
So they haven't got
so the CAC did not discuss
No.
individual. Okay, good.
that,
That's it.
hopefully,
Thanks.
from what they said, is that, we'll see it, in the next month or so, an actual firm list, like you say, 1 through 20 or whatever.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
any other?
I do have a question.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. You indicated that on the bylaws revision, there were 2 dissenting votes. What was their preference?
Actually, that was not on the actual bylaws itself. What it was the makeup of the options as far as the how many CAC members we would have once CalAN was added. So it wasn't actually the bylaws themselves. It was the composition of the CAC committee that was actually voted on. And I think Rick would like to make a comment.
Yes, so Councilmember Williams, we will ask for Mr. Sonnenberg to address that.
Excellent. Thank you.
When there was an individual CAC member tally, the tally was 8 to 5 to 1. 8 for option 1, 5 for option 2, and 1 for option 3. I then probably incorrectly asked for a final motion, and that's where the 13 to 2 came. It could have been that the motion it's probably more correctly, it should have been the motion was 8 to 5 to 1. Now, in response to Councilmember Williams' reasons for the split of 8 to 5 to 1, I'd have to yield to Larry. I think it was just different priorities on the different three options and the component parts, whether or not Manitou should be reduced from 2 to 1, how many alternates there should be, and whether or not there should be an even number or odd number of voting members. So of the three components that go into the three, or the board could come up with a fourth option. I don't know that each individual CAC member stated their reasons.
And in a further explanation, we are actually going to have a longer discussion about that on the item on the agenda, which is item number 9A.
Okay, thank you. Ultimately, though, so there was discussion, there was there were differing views, and then the final result was a 13-2 vote once they had that. So thank you very much.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the CAC report.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, there are no opposed. That passes. Thank you, Larry. Now we're going to take some time with Bev on the monthly financial reports.
Good afternoon, board members. So yesterday we received our $13,818,000 for the month of December, which was almost $500,000 over the monthly budget. But of course, this is an amended budget, which is 3.7% ahead of an amended budget. But page 2 really tells the story, because that compares December of this year to December of last year. And we're ahead of December of last year by $2,356,000 or 20.5%. So for the year compared to last year's actuals, we were ahead $25.6 million or 21%. So it's been quite a good year. And are there any questions on the reports?
All right, any questions on the financial reports? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Beverly. And that is an informational item. So, okay, now we're going to move on to item 7A, the City of Colorado Springs contracts. Gail.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Gail Sturdivant, City Engineer, Deputy Public Works Director with the City of Colorado Springs. The city is going to be presenting 8 contracts that we'll be asking for the board's approval here at the end. I'll go through those, and if you have questions with each one, please let me know. The first contract is for our 2022 Major Bridge Inspection Program. All of our bridges, we have 434 bridges, of which 229 are minor bridges. Those bridges get inspected on 4-year frequencies, and our majors get inspected on 2-year frequencies. It is time for that 4-year inspection on those bridges. The city has gone through an RFP process with our on-call, and then made the selection based on the right qualified staff to be able to perform the work. With this contract, the total value is going to be $298,560, of which we're asking PPRTA to provide $218,560 for the major transportation bridge structures. With this contract, we do have 75 pedestrian bridges that are responsibility of Parks Department. We do help them out with those. And so that's where the other $80,000 will be coming from. We're proposing this particular contract be awarded to Basis Partners. Any questions with that item? All right, next one. The second one is actually a combination of 2 programs underneath the companion drainage bridge improvements for roadway projects. and PPRTA maintenance. We have 17 culverts. They're both corrugated metal pipe and reinforced concrete pipe that we're going to be applying cured in place pipelining underneath these locations. The total cost for this work would be $2,282,707, which would be split under two programs. The first under that capital drainage improvements under roadways, which is $414,000. And under a PPRTA maintenance fund, which would be $1,868,707. I will mention the city did go through an RFP process for this. We had 4 respondents, and the selection was based both on qualifications, the material proposed, and price. Any questions on that item? All right, moving on to number 3. This is a contract that's applied to the 2 South Academy reconstruction projects. We have the north phase, which is Bijou to Airport, and the south phase, which is Fountain Boulevard to Mountain Proby Parkway. This change order is for AECom that would cover additional utility, subsurface utility location and a couple point locations on the project to help resolve some conflicts, additional utility and stormwater design, right-of-way acquisition, and engineering services during construction. The total value of this change order would be $931,101. And it would be split between those 2 capital A-list projects, with the north phase having $307,264 applied to it, and the south phase having $623,837 applied to it. Any questions on that item? All right, moving on to contract number 4. This one is specific to the Academy Boulevard project from Bijou to Airport Road, or that north phase. The city put out a request for proposals on which we received 5 respondents for construction management services. AECom was selected as the most qualified firm to provide that work. There is provisions though in that RFP process that we could have the same construction manager also work on the south segment as well. Just to let you know, that contract is in the amount of $1,362,164.50. Questions on that item? Okay.
Next one.
Moving on to contract number 5, we're coming to ask for a contract to replace our program and construction management software. We've talked about that Centric software that's used for construction management activities that was originally purchased by PPRTA back, I think, very early on during the authorization. That software is no longer supported, and it was a historically license based, and PPRTA had paid for that initial implementation costs and had been paying annual fees. The city has gone through an extensive, almost 2-year RFP process with various software consultants. We ended up went through an RFP process for this final selection where we had 12 respondents. We went through detailed interviews with the top 3, and we've made this selection to go with Origo. The initial implementation cost for PPRTA would be $182,857, and that our total contract for this initial value is $276,857. Other portions of Public Works, the Parks Department, and the Stormwater Enterprise will be picking up the remainder of that cost. This is for the initial implementation and also the first year subscription fees. We would anticipate a $100,000 total annual fee in the future, of which PPRTA is $66,220, and that's what we'd be expecting in years 2 through 5. Any questions on that item? All right, now we get to the exciting stuff. Back to our A-list project. 3 Black Forest Road items back to back here. The first one is for the last large real estate purchase for the Black Forest Road improvements for the Woodman Land Development LLC. The city did go through city council and received approval yesterday for this property acquisition in accordance with the city's real estate manual. Of this, there is an exhibit attached. The city does need to obtain a total of 0.85 acres, and that is split between right-of-way, permanent easements, and temporary construction easements. The value, appraised value for that property is $134,600, and that value has been accepted by the property owners. Questions on that item? All right. The next one is for the construction of Black Forest Road. I think this is what we're really all hoping to get to. The city had construction, an invitation for bid that was put out. We did receive 4 respondents. The cost range did vary quite a bit. We had one that was fairly close to the engineer's estimate, and that was Wildcat Construction and who we were proposing to award that work to. We also had 3 other respondents, of which one was over 25% over the engineer's estimate, just kind of give you a frame of reference. The total construction contract value is $20,740,628.15. We are asking for your board's approval. I will give you a heads up that there is going to be one larger change order coming for some channel restoration work that we will have to add on to their contract in the future as we get final approval from the Corps on that. Any questions on that construction contract? All right, last one on Black Forest Road. As part of this project, there are some wetland impacts that we are required to mitigate. The impacts are 0.43 acres. The mitigation requirement is a total of 0.9 acres. As you can see from the memo in your packet, that we went through an analysis of whether or not we should purchase credits, do on-site mitigation, or do off-site mitigation. As you can see from the analysis table, that it was cheaper from a cost standpoint and had less impacts on the schedule for us to purchase the credits. And we are proposing to do so from the Maria Lake Mitigation Bank. The cost for that 0.9 acres of mitigation is it's actually $171,000. So there is an error in my memo and on the sheet, but as I got the invoice, I was off by $1,000. So we are asking for the board's approval for $171,000. Any questions on that item?
This
Any
is Yolanda.
Go ahead, Yolanda.
And it's not so much that I have a question. It's more that, we are disrupting the ecological system, and that's why these wetlands procedures are in place. But it's like we're sending it, I think it's by Walsenburg, right?
That is correct. Maria Lake is near Walsenburg.
And I think it's really cognizant as we're building and we're looking at greenhouse effects, and to really keep this in mind, because even though we pay what it is and send it over there, it's leaving a neighborhood, an area that has relied on that ecosystem. And so I have a pre-meeting with Rick, so we go through all that. And that's why on your other items, I didn't have questions, Gail, because you seem to know what I asked. So you covered all my questions. So I kind of get a feel for this board, but I just think it's important that we look at everything holistically. I know everybody's excited for this, but it is concerning on the disruption of the ecosystem there in Black Forest. Thank you.
Yes, and I appreciate those comments. Councilmember Williams.
Yeah, with the construction contract being awarded and the purchase of the right of way, do we have all the right of way we need now, or is there still some more out there for this project?
I think we're at the end stages, maybe button up some of the last. I don't know the actual answer to that, but we don't anticipate any jeopardy from delaying the project for these last right-of-way bits. They've all have offers. I don't know that all of them have been signed or checks paid out to them.
Okay.
I could find out though for you.
Thanks. I would appreciate it.
Okay, any additional further questions or discussion? All right, and I'm not seeing anyone else online. I will entertain a motion then.
Madam Chair, I'd move approval of the city contracts.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the contract is approved. Thank you. I think our next item is the county.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. Today I have one item for your consideration. It is a contract amendment to our design contract with AECom. We're recommending to amend that contract for about $157,000. Within that contract, we are adding some property acquisition during the right-of-way evaluation phase. We found some property that we were impacting minor. I think it's one property additional that we are adding into that. Some additional environmental engineering to clear some of the environmental in that area. We have found some additional impacts, and then also are addressing some noise walls and noise concerns because this area is also partially federally funded. This project is partially federally funded. And then also some additional test holes for utility relocations. We found some conflicts and want to make sure that we address those as much as possible in advance of the construction, so that we don't, we reduced any of that risk as much as possible. So that is our recommendation. We are close to finalizing the entire design of this project and are working with the contractor. If you remember, this project was added as part of the overall MAMSIP project with CDOT. And so we are under negotiations with the contractor at this point and evaluating that construction. So if you have any questions about this project, I'd be happy to answer those.
All right, does anyone have any questions? All right, seeing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve El Paso County contract.
Move approval. Second.
Okay, we have a first from Councilmember Wayne and a second from Councilmember Randy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that passes. Oh, any opposed, just in case. Sorry, I'm running it like a dictator today. No opposition. Okay, that passes. Thank you. The next one is item 7C, and I guess Gail, if you could go first on that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Rick.
As the board will recall, the board set aside a little over $1 million of PPRTA admin funds for the purpose of allowing the conduct of preparing engineering cost estimates for the PPRTA 3 capital projects that would be available to the member governments to propose RFPs to the PPRTA, and then PPRTA would be the owner of the contract with the engineering firms. So the City of Colorado Springs did propose 3 engineering firm RFPs to me. I sent those to the engineering firms of choice, of the city's choice, and then the county sent me one RFP to forward to the engineering firm of their choice. The 3 city RFP responses came back. The city had an allowance out of the first amount of the 500,000 that was available out of the $1 million. The city's 3 proposals that came back to me were from Basis Partners, Kimley Horn, and NV5. And then the county's one proposal was from Felsberg, Holton, Ulvig. The 4 dollar amounts are contained on page 2 of my memo. So the city staff, county staff, and I am recommending approval of the 4 contracts with the 4 different engineering firms for cost estimates in the amount shown. So I'll give, Madam Chair, give it back to you for board discussion and potentially a motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions on item 7C, the Pikes Peak RTA contracts for engineering cost estimates? All right, I see no questions online and I see no questions in the room. Does anyone like to make a motion?
I move approval of item 7C.
This way, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing no opposition, that passes. The, just as a note, when we see Dan Jablan pop up on the screen, you might need to wave me down, because we do want to make sure we hear about our legislative report today. Okay, item number 8A, the City of Colorado Springs Transit Services Monthly Update.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the City of Colorado Springs. Our report is in your agenda, and I'm going to go through that pretty quickly, but then I want to sort of focus on the project update at the end and the status of our driver shortage issue. So in our report, local bus service, again, is steadily increasing, so about 4% year over year compared to the December in 2020. With our ADA, it's actually significant increase year over year from the previous year of about 60%. And so that service as especially as some of the day programs are starting to run in full since COVID, that service is picking up because about half of our riders are part of those day programs. With the taxi choice, that is growing steadily as well. Vanpool is kind of remains in its current state with regard of fewer commuters going to Denver. Again, we expect that to pick up later this year. On the project update, so spring service changes, I've reported this to you before, but we have been getting public comments, and we expect to be going forward with that in April. And with Route 23, that's northeast part of town, going to double up on the frequency on the northern half of Route 23. And then also operate regular service on 3 major holidays: Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Labor Day. So both of those are things that are broadly supported by our riders. And on the driver shortage, so good news on our driver shortage, driver availability front. We have seen a significant increase in applications and number of trainees interested in becoming drivers. And COVID has backed off as well. So with COVID, on January 14th, about the time I was here last month, we had 19 drivers were in quarantine with 9 positive cases, and the rest who were exposed. Today, we have 5 drivers in quarantine. So a big improvement there. That's a net increase of 14 drivers. And with additional trainees as well. As a result, we've been able to restore a significant amount of service starting on January 23rd. That's a Sunday. And we also have 7 new drivers that come out of training in the month of February and 4 more in early March. And then we also have 8 additional trainees starting February 14th. It takes about 6 weeks to get through the training where the drivers gain a CDL as well. So on January 23rd, with that major restoration of service, we added back service on routes 14 and 17. And routes 10 and 11 went from 60-minute service to 30-minute service. And that puts us to the point that there are only 3 routes that are not running at all. There are some other routes with reduced frequency. The routes that are not running are the 3 lowest ridership routes in our system. So those are routes 18, which goes up Union, is kind of duplicates service. Route 35 that goes to the El Paso County Jail and the work release program, and Route 38 that goes to the hospitals. And we expect to be talking to the hospitals here very soon to plan restoring those as well. So good news on that front, and so things are looking better for us. And when we don't provide service, we're not paying our contractor, and so we're looking forward to adding service and paying out to our contractor in accordance with our budget. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions on the report itself?
Chair, this is Yolanda.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't have assistance today to raise my hand, so.
No, that's okay.
Being rude and just interrupting.
That's probably better for you.
It's just more of a comment. I'm really excited about this, that the COVID cases are down, and they're down everywhere, and that I feel like Transit's been really working hard on rectifying this in the best way we can. So it's really good news to see that we're graduating drivers and that they're going to join the ranks. And the reason is because in all the other industries, it's still really tough going in so many industries and even the driving, trucking and all that. But so I think this is good news, and I I thank the department for making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
Okay. So thank you very much, Councilor Member Avila, and I might put you on the spot again here in a minute. I was just going to ask, do we have that, Craig, do we have a route that goes for the work released for the jail? Is that still going?
It is not going at this moment.
Okay.
So, yeah, we want to restore, geographic coverage as soon as we can, probably
Sure.
first, and then look at frequency after that.
Yeah, I think we're hoping to get our work release going again and get more people into that. So
Yes.
there was a question by Council Member Avila that Randy had. And so Randy, did you want to bring that up? And this is a discussion point.
Sure. As we look down the road to the future, we're dealing with the state legislature about greenhouse gases. How can we reduce emissions throughout our region? And one of the ways might be considered, is there any thought to changing our percentages of our PPRTA from the 50%, 35 and 10, 55%, 35 and 10? Is there any discussion? Has anybody thought of that? Yolanda and I discussed that situation of increasing the transit piece to fit from 10 to 15%.
And in, first of all, I kept Mr. Blewett up here for a reason, because they have a healthy reserve from the Pikes Peak RTA. And if either you or Rick want to take on why we have a healthy reserve there, that is an interesting fact that helps us to know.
So we do have a healthy reserve and carryover, and we included that information in our 2022 budget materials as presented here to the board in November. And the carryover sources are, we do carry over a targeted reserve so that if we do have a decline, downturn in sales tax collection, we can absorb that for a period of time. And that targeted reserve is 17% of annual operating. Also, it's another source of carryover funds is committed matching funds for federal grants for major capital projects. We do have two major capital projects. We have a bus storage facility, it's about a $16 million project in the downtown transit center, which will also be a high dollar project. The other source of reserve we have is from the federal relief funds, which did benefit our reserves. In our with our planned service improvements that we have a path where we would draw down our reserve down to the targeted, our carryovers down to our targeted reserve amount in 5 years. So the plan is to draw that carryover down by the year 2027.
Okay. All right, Gail.
Madam Chair, if I could maybe address the first part of that question that Mr. Helms presented. We talked about the percentage split. Should we be reevaluating that? And I think we discussed that early on when we were in the development of the PPRTA 3 matrix. And at the time, it was determined that it would be best to leave that as is and talk about just the extension of that capital piece, because as you're aware, that 10% and transit currently doesn't sunset. So kind of knowing that was the direction, as we as the city has started looking about what we would be doing with our capital funds. We've been working very closely with Craig and Brian Vituli in putting some strategies in place to be prepared to use some capital fundings, additional capital funding beyond the programs they had in RTA 2 into RTA 3 to help. So for example, you'll see when you start to see the city's programs, we've changed those so we can really pick up whether it's a vehicle, stops and stations, or basically transit enhancements, or basically giving us the ability to stand up a new service. We will likely see A project that's scoring well for us as we're getting ready to pull our list together is a North Nevada Enhanced Transit implementation that we would like to actually split into phases 1 and 2 for an A and B list kind of strategy to make sure we have some options for some other transit opportunities, because we are very cognizant that we are going to likely have to incorporate other items into our projects to make sure we're going to be greenhouse gas emission mitigation compliant.
Wanda. So Randy, thanks so much for bringing it up, because I've had that in the back of my mind for a while. And I did want to talk with you, Wayne, about that how we could have, the 15% for transit, given the climate we're in, and we are now compelled to comply. So I think it would show, what I'm hearing is that that's not going to be the case. We'll just take it from capital projects, but I think it would really be a strong showing that, listen, we've upped this 5% because we're committed to doing whatever it is we can do to encourage, multimodal transit, transportation, and reducing the greenhouse effect in any way we can. So I just think it's really great to be proactive and figure out that way. So I'm trying to understand, is that bringing up the healthy reserves was I don't know, was that to make a point that we have that, maybe we could be using that. So I really like the board to look at that. I just think it would be a great thing. I hope that we could gain support on that. And we also have, and I guess it would be considered a capital project, but it could really run closely with that, with the new transit station that will be located downtown. So I think if we're just forward thinking and being proactive, we can maybe even be a model for the rest of the state. Thank you.
Okay, and I do appreciate that. Can I go to, I had like 3 minutes of prep on this issue, so the healthy reserves was just something I hadn't known. Andy, did you still want to say something, Mr. Gunning?
Sure,
Okay.
Madam Chair, just real briefly, I know we're getting into our transportation plan update right now this year, and then we'll be developing that over the next 2 years. And I know part of that is updating our transit plan for the region as well. And I would suggest that might be a good opportunity to see, based on where some of the needs are that aren't being currently met, maybe if there's an appetite to perhaps expand the percentage, maybe it's a good time to have that conversation at that point. As we update our transportation plan out to the year 2050, that's when we need to figure out how we're going to comply with the new GHG rules that we're still really learning about. I know some of the mitigation guidance is going to be coming out over the coming months from the state. So it's a timely issue to bring up and put into the mix, but we might need, I would suggest maybe a little bit more time as MMT in the region get into the transit plan update to see what the needs are out there to decide where we go.
Okay, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So so the one question is, as we have, and this kind of did come up in different aspects of how to break up the dollars, whether we should change the proportion, as I think we saw last year in the city's, one of the city's proposals. One group was upset that they changed the proportion of, this was the parks tax proportion. And if we've tried very hard not to change the language on what we're doing, because people have been very supportive of PPRTA, and PPRTA 2 does changing proportions, have some people come off the support, as we saw on another tax issue, when you changed it, and the people who had been proponents of it ended up not being proponents of it. So that's my concern, is if we do too many changes to PPRTA 3, as we've been talking for a year, trying to minimize that because we have been so successful in the previous ballot votes.
Okay, I frequently don't listen to Council Member Wayne, so I'll give him his point now.
Okay. Now, I would note that one of the most effective ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to stop traffic from idling. And one of the most important things to accomplish that is intersection improvements, grade separated interchanges, and other things that the Pikes Peak RTA capital construction projects accomplish. And so taking money away from something that is effective in reducing. If you go back and look at what used to happen at Nevada and Austin Bluffs, or Austin Bluffs and Union before the Pikes Peak RTA projects there, people would sit through 4 to 6 cycles of the light generating emissions. And so taking it away from capital projects, I don't think is appropriate. I also think that when you look at a 10-year extension, if you, to Commissioner Gonzalez's point, if you change this from a 10-year extension to something permanent, that's a very different campaign to run. It's also a very different campaign to run with respect to saying, okay, well, we'll just put some operation dollars in there, but it expires after 10 years, because then what happens to the transit system when that 10-year period ends? So I think the better way to address it is through specific capital construction dollars for trails that can be used for commuting and for supportive things, whether it's bus station improvements or other things along that line, that are specific capital projects, and the city can put those within there. It also doesn't change the balance of the allocation of funds, because the city essentially gets 100% of the dollars for transit. And so when you compare that to the other jurisdictions, if you shift away from capital construction and shift it into a separate item, that shifts the balance, and that may cause problems getting the support we need in rural parts of this community for who have zero transit, increasing it. And so this was a balance. We had this discussion very much about where it should be. As with the other parts of the budget, this is now more than double what was originally proposed, because we're looking at 7 million a year, and now we're talking about 15 million a year going into transit. So I do think that it does make sense for the city with their allocation to say this amount of money should go towards capital improvements that will assist the bus routes. This amount of money, as we've done with some others. So the Pikes Peak Greenway is one of the things that we have funded. And we look at, if you're looking at greenhouse gas credits, trails are an important part of that as well. And I'm talking mostly about ways that people can get to work, as opposed to the trail you drive to then recreate on, which doesn't have that same greenhouse gas effect. But there are significant needs in the capital construction that we are woefully short of. And the extension isn't going to begin to cover what is needed in the city right now. And we see those struggles occurring now, where in the existing RTA, we have massive needs with respect to things like Mark Shuffle and the Powers extension. And then we have, in part, because of the nature of COVID and the nature of getting drivers, a very large reserve in the transit side. And if we were to shift the ballot language, that is an issue that would be used against the campaign, which is you're sitting on millions of dollars that you haven't used. Why are you asking to increase it? So I do think it's appropriate on the city side, particularly, to look at some capital expenditures that support this, as well as trails. I think those are some of the things that I know, I think CTAB's looking at those issues right now. And, but I think that's the better way to do it, rather than try to restructure the entire RTA.
Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't want to rehash a lot of the comments, but I'm grateful for the comments specifically related to the more rural areas. As a resident of the unincorporated area, I can tell you that that would be my big concern, is that you'd lose a lot of support if those things were to be shifted in the direction of transit. And I think there've been a lot of very well thought out comments on that related to idling and those type of things as well. But I just wanted to toss in my appreciation of thinking about those unincorporated and more rural areas who do have different needs, and remembering that those folks are a part of the district as well. And just throw in my 2 cents there that I agree with those comments that have been made and think that that would be a bit problematic to shift that at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Geithner. Are there further comments? Gail?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to appreciate the comments from the 2 commissioners and from Councilor Williams, and we 100% concur from a staff perspective. The one thing, I guess, a couple things I will mention, even when we're going through and doing what would be a typical roadway expansion, we're looking at it from a complete streets lens, whether we're doing sidewalks, multi-use paths. A lot of times we'll either have dedicated bike lanes or enhanced shoulders so that they can be used for cyclists who are more comfortable being on the roadway. But the one I want to mention 2 things that could happen with these greenhouse gas regulations, whether we particularly going to non-attainment. We go into non-attainment if our projects are, whether RTA funded or not, are not demonstrating the appropriate mitigation. Our STP Metro funds and a CMAQ funding would be restricted to projects that could only provided mitigation. So that's really from the federal dollars. And so you got to remember, if we aren't doing it or doing the right things, that everything would really mostly shift to transit or transit and parks to be able to go through and do that. And if you go and look at some of the funding under Senate Bill 260, and I'll pick on MMOF because we're hoping for a call for projects on that. We're looking at $18.9 million coming to the Pikes Peak region in this next call for projects on MMOF. Really, the city, unfortunately, are the only ones who are even semi-positioned to be able to do that, because that has a 50-50 match. And where we're looking at, we talked about Craig's reserves. Well, some of that we actually anticipate going for 1 or 2 or 3 different transit projects, and then likely trails projects where the Parks Department has the ability to bring matching funds. So just for example, one of the things we've been talking about with the county and with Manitou Springs is, let's talk about the Midland Trail, right? That's a multi-jurisdictional, could be a multi-jurisdictional effort that we could capture MMOF funds, but that requires us as the other jurisdictions to come up with 50% match. The city's Parks Department said in that particular case, there's a trails and open space funding that could be available. I guess my bottom line is, what I was trying to say is, there is going to be so many pots of money coming out there that are going to be most likely applied to transit operations or enhancements, and likely our trail enhancements, and we won't have the ability to apply for those funds for more traditional vehicular focused roadway improvements. So I'd be very hesitant to shift money away from RTA from those kinds of improvements. And I don't know, Jennifer, if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
I think Gail said it well. In addition to that, there's a lot more funding coming from these federal direct and the recent bills from the feds in regards to those same programs. And a lot of those, again, just because of, the D versus the R in the White House, we're seeing a lot of that come, really focusing on those greenhouse gas and trails and transit. So I think what we're seeing is that there's shifting money away from some of those road projects, and it's putting us in a position that we're having less and less funding for traditional roadway projects, and more funding for those multimodal projects, which we support, and those are important. But we have to be careful in thinking about how we strategize, and this is something that we've been working on between the city and the county and PPACG. I think trying to work and understand some of those direct programs kind of in the background as we try to look at our lists. But I just want to emphasize, and this is something that we had a good meeting with Susan Davies, Trails and Open Space, and talking with her about this, is that I think that one of the things that we don't talk about very well is a lot of our projects, and Gail mentioned it too, but I just want to kind of foot stomp it, is that when we do those projects, we're looking at all of those items to incorporate into those projects. So I think, from that standpoint, we're spending a lot of money outside of those dedicated named projects on trails, open space, sidewalks, ADA, and then making sure that it all complements and is incorporated into the transit elements. So those are a lot of things that we're doing, and I think that we're from my perspective, working on that very hard, and as a governmental organization, not only at our local level, but also trying to look at it from a regional level, not only through PPRTA, but also through PPACG.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Geithner, did you have another comment? No? Okay. She owes
Sorry
us a
about that.
donut.
I know, I was gonna say, I owe you a donut. I just left my hand up. Sorry about that.
So yes, I thought this would be a good time to bring this report up. So thank you, Craig, for your explanation right there on the spot. I think they're very fascinating comments from a member. I sit on the State Transportation Advisory Committee, and in all honesty, I think it's kind of a wait and see approach. I think in 5 years, we wait and see, and the board of directors at that time may have to revisit this subject at some point. We just have to kind of wait and see how this whole greenhouse gas thing falls out. And I just, none of us really know until we give it a few years of experience. So I thought it was a very worthwhile idea to talk about. So I appreciate Yolanda bringing it up. All right. Am I okay to move on? Okay. Now we are on item 8B, the information item of the City of Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition report.
Madam Chair, Gail Sutton with the City of Colorado Springs here. This is an informational item, and I'm available if there are questions on the change order or property acquisition information provided in your packets.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing no questions, then item 8C, maintenance of effort reports. Rick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the board is well aware, the establishing IGA contains the maintenance of effort provision. And historically, the member governments have provided their maintenance of effort reports in February of each year after their respective governing bodies approve their upcoming fiscal year budgets. So the six, we included Calhan this year. Member governments submitted their maintenance of effort reports. I verified the base year amounts looking back historically, and the CAC found that all six member governments were in compliance with the maintenance of effort provision. So the motion before the board would be whether or not you want to approve a motion finding all six member governments in compliance with the maintenance of effort provision.
Are there any questions? Okay, Council Member Williams.
Not a question as so much as a comment, which is if you look at the actual reports, first, thank you all entities for doing it. Second, I would note that many of the entities are significantly above the commitment, which illustrates that we view that as a minimum. Cities transit, for example, is 2.5 million above that maintenance of effort. The maintenance is 11.2 million above. So we are actually not just meeting that bare minimum, but actually exceeding. And I think that's worth noting because when you talk about promises made, promises kept, which is part of the Pikes Peak RTA, the fact that the city for the last 3 years at least has been meeting that maintenance of effort, and our colleagues in the other jurisdictions are, I think, is worthy of recognition because it is an important part of what we said, and I think it's important the public knows. So I do move approval of the maintenance of effort reports.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other further comments? All right,
Yolanda, just clarification. So the movement is our, and this is on the policy, right? So are we sticking with 2004? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Or
this is actually
just that
not.
we've met and gone further.
No, the policy, this is just a annual report that Rick has given us. And then shortly, we're coming to that discussion, Yolanda, that I know that we need to have on item number 9B. So we got 2 more items before that one.
Yeah. So, I know we've met it but the Good News Bev doesn't get her name Good News Bev for anything. We have better have met it and superseded it. So given the economy and how we were, thanks to like online shopping, able to keep our revenue up. So just that comment. Thank you.
Okay, just wait till we hear from Downer Dan today. That's our legislative report. Sorry, I had to throw that in. He's not on yet, so I can go after him, right? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, wow. Hopefully you didn't hear that. Okay, speak of the lobbyist. Oh, that was awkward, wasn't it?
So, Madam Chair, did you want to take the legislative report out of sequence
Oh,
or ask Dan if he can wait 10 or 15?
Actually,
10 or 15. You don't need to change it if you don't need to.
okay, we just made a joke about you. So yeah, we'll go ahead and wait 10 or 15. I'll have to keep you updated, Dan.
It's probably not the first joke about me today.
It won't be the last, I assure you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's continue on to item 8D. And that is Rick.
This is simply an information item. The board had directed the 5-member governments to staffs to submit information regarding the use of the additional funds from the 2 budget amendments last year, 2021. Those memos are attached, and if you have any questions, feel free to direct those to the respective member government.
Okay, if there are any questions on those, let's take the time to review them and make sure we ask our respective governments if we need to. All right, go ahead, Councilmember Williams.
I just want to thank the governments for doing this. And I think we do see that there were a number of advancements that were able to be made because we made those changes in the budget. And so I know there were sometimes concerns expressed with respect to timing and other things, but I very much am appreciative of the fact that a number of things were able to be accomplished despite the lack of a year-long notice for the process. So thank you, all governments, for your help on that.
Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, I just wanted to pat on the back, Good News Bev, and remind the board that the original budget for 2021 was 105 million. Then we had 2 budget amendments, and then it was a budget of 138, and we ended up with almost 147, starting at 105.
So we had a very, very good year last year. Yes. That might be good though. So the next item is item 9A, the revision to the CAC bylaws for the town of Calhan. If I could take a moment to explain this. The CAC voted on, this is different options for how many voters each city and town will get on the CAC. There was a vote on that. There are actually 4 different options. I am just in kind of a moment of chairman's privilege. I want to ask the mayor of Manitou if he would like to table that until next month.
Yes, I would. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I do think it deserves some additional consideration by the CAC. And I guess in part, I think it's sort of natural from the perspective of the other jurisdictions to see Manitou as a small town. And in fact, we're about 5,000 people, but I'm the mayor of about 15,000 people during a summer day. And we've got, it's like 2 to 1 with visitors. If you've been to Manitou lately and you know what it's like to park or get around, you can see what half to 2/3 of the citizens are contending with. So it's a huge traffic and transportation is a huge problem in Manitou. I do think that it would be appropriate to consider Manitou in a little bit different perspective and to understand some of the problems that we deal with. So if I could indulge the board, I would request that this be given further consideration.
Yes, and just as an additional explanation, I would ask that the CAC look at this also and allow Rick to explain the difference in the amount of sales tax Manitou produces, because they produce a hefty amount of sales tax. And I will joke here, it's not all due to marijuana. It's actually due to tourists. So that would, so I do want to give this item a chance to be tabled. So I will entertain a motion for that. If anyone has any questions, let's ask them.
I would move that this item be tabled.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion to table the item. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The one other question that came as a result of this, I don't think we have to have a big discussion about that, is to make a determination, just to have the CAC look at also the number of at-large alternates. They alternate each month who votes. We have fantastic attendance at the CAC. And so, the question was, do we have too many alternates? Not enough. So they're going to revisit that too, and we can dig into that further next month. Okay, because we got some other items. Revision to board policy number 11. Let's go with this, Rick.
At the December board meeting, the board directed staff to place this item on the agenda for today. And attached is the original board policy 11 from 2006, where the board set by board policy that 2004 would be the base year for the maintenance of effort provision. The provision is in the establishing IGA, but the base year is in board policy 11. The board directed me to remind the board of 2 additional options for updating the 2004 base year. And those 2 options were 2017, 2019. So I'll turn it back to the chair and for board discussion.
All right, so we have, and just so you know, the maintenance of effort base year is the actual year. We try not to we cannot reduce our county transportation budget below our maintenance of effort year. So if one was 500,000 at the PERTA, we can't go below 500,000 at the county in our general fund. Is that the example?
So it would be whatever a member government's non-RTA, pre-RTA budget was in 2004. They should continue to not go below that in their non-RTA budget. The maintenance of effort applies both in the base year, whatever the base year is or becomes, is all non-RTA money.
Okay. So we've argued between 2 different options. The recommendation of staff, I don't know if Gail and Jennifer, if you wanted to review that, I think it was 2017. Okay. And that we've talked about whether or not we should increase that by inflation or whatever. The recommendation of the county finance and the city finance department is 2017, but I can't see, is Council Member Avila still on the call?
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay, your turn. Go ahead with 2019.
Oh, I feel like I've been speaking into the wind, and I know I'm not going to move anyone on it. And so I just, I'm gonna say, like Wayne, you said that transit's doubled, by $7,000. Well, I'm gonna say that that's everything, all the components. as we see from Good News Bev, all the revenue coming in. And actually, it's since I've been here in 2017, it's been increasing and increasing. You know, we're the most desirable city, and I know we're talking about other counties as well, but to live in. And one day, you know, I guess this sharpens my axe, but it just seems like in 2017, when PPRTA 3 begins in 2025, that'll already be what, 8 years, 7 years at the beginning, and then 17 years by the end of PPRTA 3. It just seems more to be in alignment, at least 2019. I would myself say it's 2021, but I know that that would never go over. But I see the writing on the wall, and that's about all I have to say.
Councilmember Williams.
So this does advance it by 13 years. And so I think that's a significant move from, because with RTA 2, there was no change at all. And so it does make a change. I don't think 2019 is a correct year to use for maintenance of effort. As we've discussed in the past, it's the height of an economic boom time period. And I've been in government where you had to make very tough budget cuts because the boom eventually ends and you have recessions. And I am not saying when one will happen, but I think it would be rather naive to presume that there is never a recession in a 10-year period of RTA 3 and to say we will always be able to meet where we were in an economic boom year like 2019, I don't think is an appropriate year to use. And I think the ensuing 2 years are skewed tremendously by federal aid with respect to COVID. And so I think 2017 is a 13-year update, so it does advance it. I would note that for both these are things that are not part of the renewal, actually, because this is for transit and maintenance, that the maintenance of efforts required to be kept. And so those are actually not part of the renewal because they continue on. But I do think it is appropriate to update it. And I think 2017, as recommended by the staff, is an appropriate year. But this does change it by 13 years. So it's a significant move.
Yes, and I will state, since it is a board policy, that it can be revisited every year if anyone would still like to. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Oh, thank you. And I do appreciate this getting updated closer to where we are, as was mentioned by Councilman Williams. Unfortunately, these numbers are the last couple of years skewed. This year alone, I think El Paso County added another 11 million or 14 million. I know actually we're adding another 20 plus million in this odd year. If we were to say, hey, 2022, because this is the most current year, we have money that will not get replicated again because of all the changes over the COVID situation and federal dollars and assistance. So I think originally we said 2019 was good, but 2017 was the most appropriate for the group of entities here. And so I'm good with either 2019 or 2017, but it does look like 2017 is the one that had the most consensus. And so I can support that also.
Okay, I think, are we ready to have a motion for 2017 as the base year?
Ms. Swain, so moved.
I'll second John Graham.
Okay, all in favor of changing our maintenance of effort base year to 2017, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
I'm not opposed, but I'm just want to abstain if that's,
Okay,
I'm able to.
that passes with one abstention. Thank you, Yolanda. So I appreciate that. Our next item. This is a draft revision to the board bylaws to add the town of Calhan the second review and approval. I think we did review this last month. Go ahead, Rick, if you have a further update.
I'll yield to the board's attorney, Jennifer Ivey, but this is simply having the board bylaws match the establishing IGA, the fourth amended establishing IGA regarding the revision in board voting shares.
Move approval. This is Wayne.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second John Graham.
Any discussion? This, I think, was an item we discussed last month as well. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. The next item is the draft comprehensive IGA with the town of Callahan. Jennifer, did you want to explain that?
Yeah, this is just the accompanying IGA that we have with each of the member jurisdictions. It looks a little odd because we've got some reserved sections in there where the capital portions will be added in once we've done the capital renewal and Callahan has capital projects. This follows the format that we used with RAMA, which was just to mimic the same IGA we have with all the member governments, but then just reserve the sections where the capital was until we have to redo these, which will have to be redone with every member government after we do the capital renewal. So that's when that'll be caught up. There's no deviations from what we have in effect with the other member governments. So this is a standard agreement and it was approved by the town of Callahan at their January meeting.
All right, I'll entertain them. Oh, any questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
This Wayne, move approval.
I'll second John Graham.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Well, now we can just formally welcome Callahan in. Right. I can't see Dan on the screen anymore. Is he still there?
He's here. Would I leave the party early? No, never.
No. Okay, so we're going to turn the time. I did call him Downer Dan for a reason because we have good news, Bev. Our lobbyist, Dan Jablon, is going to explain to us. Go ahead, you can walk in front of me. The two sales tax amendments, which could really cause a serious revenue. Well, one of them will cause a revenue reduction. So we may ask Bev to comment on that too, if she's still on. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, well, we'll do it. Just before I get into these two bills, if you haven't heard, I just wanted to update you real quick. The Senate Democrats today elected Steve Finberg to take over for the rest of the Senate as the Senate president. As I'm sure as you all know, Senator Garcia has stepped down effective February 23rd to accept a president appointment at the Pentagon. So Steve Finberg from Boulder will be the new Senate president. Dominic Moreno will be the new majority leader. He's from Adams County. And then taking his spot on the JBC will be Senator Rachel Zinzinger from Arvada. And that was kind of to be expected, the way that happened. But with a 2015 majority, I don't think it does change the voting patterns very much moving forward, but it'll be interesting to see how it does play moving through the primaries and the elections. And really the late bills that will be accepted moving forward. I do think that these assignments do move the caucus a little bit further left because as you all know, so Leroy made some gun votes and moderated his votes to a certain extent. So that is the hottest pressing news that happened this morning at the Senate at the Capitol. So I did want to get that out as well in my update. As you said, we have two bills that can have a bad effect on us. I'll go with the good news first. Senate Bill 22-1062, which Rick was working on numbers, said would have a $15 million impact on us. And that's the beverage and food tax exemption bill. The bill sponsors have been great to work with. Hugh McKean, minority leader in the House. I've been working with his policy guy. They came up with some language to write us out. Our attorney Jennifer Ivy looked at it, made some corrections so that it would be a little bit stronger. The policy guy looked at it, said, it looks good. Let me send this down to the drafter. So if 22-1062 does go, it certainly looks like we will be written out of that bill. I will say that it has probably a hard time to get through the full legislature, but only time will tell that. My fear of that bill, and it's good that we have Minority Leader McKean as the sponsor, and then Dennis Heisey and Rob Woodward are the Senate sponsors, is I think that this could possibly be an election tool to where maybe the Democrats may try to hijack the bill and take it over, but we will just have to see, because it's a pretty good election bill. But as it stands, as I'm speaking this very second, they are committed to writing us out of House Bill 22-1062 of the food and beverage exemption bill. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions on that.
Let's go ahead to Jennifer first, and then Rick, and then Commissioner Gonzalez. This is the bill regarding sales tax.
So the original suggestion that had come in was to add some verbiage to the RTA Act to specify that unless an RTA took an affirmative action to exempt the food sales tax, that they were still going to be covered by the sales tax. My suggestion back was that based on a variety of factors, it would be much stronger place to put that exemption in the state sales and use tax language that they're already editing, rather than putting it into the RTA Act, since we rely heavily on the state sales and use tax exemptions. So what I foresee is some language added in that those things will be exempt, but for, as it applies to RTAs or local governments, or however broad they want to make that carve out of their exemption. Without having seen proposed drafted language, I don't know how it's going to look exactly.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, just for an explanation on this bill, for those who don't know, this would take all food out of sales tax. El Paso County is one of those entities that only taxes food at the grocery stores that come in packages. This would also take out prepared food, like you could buy at the deli and King Soopers, or it would exempt that. And it would also exempt your Valentine's dinner or breakfast at the Broadmoor. And no, we're not going there, sorry. Yeah, but it did represent about a 1 million cut per month. So it's on our budget, right? 1 million. And so the recommendation was that we would not consider any budget amendments. And I think we still stick with that until after the legislative session is over. Because we don't want to, we've always been conservative in our estimates on our budget. So we shouldn't amend the budget and send more money out until we know for sure what's going to happen with this bill. If it's going to get wheels and start rolling down the mountain. Commissioner Gonzalez? No? Okay. And Rick?
Just for a little different wrinkle on that description. Beverly calls this the restaurant exemption bill. Right now, the PPRTA sales tax is tied to taxing whatever the state sales taxes, and grocery food is exempt, but restaurant food is taxed. So this bill would change the taxing on restaurant food to being exempt. And Beverly estimates that would, and there's no fiscal bill out of the legislature yet on this, or on the second bill that we'll talk about in a minute. So we don't have anything official out of the legislature on the fiscal note. But Beverly estimates this would be $12 to $15 million annual reduction in the PPRTA revenue. So 15 million off of 150, obviously is 135. So there's pros and cons to any tax reduction. So, but the question before the board today, both on this bill and the next bill that we'll talk about in a minute, is what do we want to rely on the carve out that Jennifer Ivy through Dan feels can be successful. How does the board feel about the first bill?
Before we do that, I just want to understand this because I wasn't really understanding. And when Holly, when you talked about the Broadmoor, I was like, what is she talking about?
Thank you,
so-
Rick. Rick explained it a lot better.
No, he didn't. Well, yeah. Oh, sorry, Rick. Well, it brought questions to mind. So we're talking like any food, like Taco Bell and McDonald's and all that stuff too. But did I hear alcohol as well or not?
Yes.
Oh,
So-
really, Dan?
so
We were
that
all
includes-
shaking our heads no, but yes, alcohol would also be exempt.
So if you go to, I don't know, Olive Garden, that
Let
there
me
would
look.
be.
I just read this, so let me make sure I'm correct on that.
This is Carrie Geithner. Yeah, I wanted to chime in because that would be a departure from the analysis of CCI. So yeah, if you could clarify that, the analysis.
Says in the bill right here, Carrie, food does not include alcohol beverages as defined in section 44-3103.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks. I thought I heard that and I was like, what? All right, thanks.
Councilmember Williams.
So going back historically, when we approved the Pikes Peak RTA, part of what we talked about in terms of why it was appropriate to use a sales tax is the necessities were exempted. So your housing, your utilities, the gas for your car, your medical bills, your prescriptions, your food were all exempt. And so part of the pitch of the RTA is that we would follow these exemptions that were used. And the idea being that you have a good year, you go out and buy the big screen TV, you have the fancy dinner at the Broadmoor, or you choose to eat out as opposed to eat Campbell's soup at home. All of this is out of the necessity range. Now, there's some exceptions in there. It's not a perfect correlation. But there was a reason for it. And that's why we followed those exemptions so that people would know, hey, this is the stuff that I have to do in order to live. The RTA is generally not taxing. So Jennifer, my question for you is, given the actual language as approved by the Pikes Peak RTA voters, to what extent are we locked into whatever the state does, we do?
You're locked in.
So because my question on this, even if we carve out an exemption in the law, if the voters said,
So you're locked into title. I don't live in this title. 29 and 39, you're locked into the statute. So a revision to the RTA statute is not very satisfying to me because your 2004 ballot question references the state sales and use tax regime.
yeah, and let me just read it. By levying a 1% sales and use tax upon every transaction or other incident with respect to which a sales and use tax is levied by the state of Colorado, excluding purchases of food for domestic home consumption, prescription medications, residential utility bills, or other exempt transactions as detailed in Articles 26 and 30, Title 39, as amended of the Colorado Revised Statutes. So if they stick it in some other provision, I think from a perspective of this is what the people approved, they've got to stick it in one of those two articles, otherwise, and I see Jennifer nodding yes. So Dan, that's why it's a very specific language that we used when we did this initiative. And I would note that, by the way, City of Colorado Springs has different exemptions than the state does for various things. And because I got this long list and it goes on for about 4 pages of differences between what we exempt. And I'm not sure what my fellow home rule municipalities do, but I know we have variations. One of them, ICE is exempt in one and not in the other. So, you know, you talk, I mean, they're little things and they're huge differences. But it definitely, in order to exempt us, has to be in 26 and 30. One of those 2 articles under Title 39, and sticking in the RTA, I don't think covers us.
So I think the question on the table is the amendment that Dan is working to offer is that we would state the amendment again. We would still be,
Yeah, so the amendment is in line with what Wayne and I are kind of bantering back and forth about here, would go into 3926 to better tie in with the 2004 ballot question, which is why I immediately pushed back against the addition of language to the RTA statute.
yes. And so I think the point is at the end of the day, do we want to carve out for the RTA or not if this bill passes? And I'm sensing maybe that we do want the carve out for the RTA, but no one's really talked to that issue.
I'll talk to it specifically. Yes, the promises we are making to the voters are very much dependent upon a certain revenue stream. And I believe that we want specifically, you know, if the state wants to change their revenue, that's fine, but they ought not to be changing ours that the voters said, this is what we want our revenue to be.
I have a little bit of a different opinion than that. If I look at an opportunity to reduce taxes, my heart, my gut, my brain tells me to do that. So I have a little bit of a conflict here with supporting the carve out piece. If we have an opportunity, understanding and knowing that we'll be reducing our overall budget anywhere from potential 12 to $15 million, and the impact that has. So I understand. We haven't got to PPRTA 3 matrix yet, so we haven't told our constituents what we're going.
This affects RTA too.
For the next, when would it go into effect? July? A year, yeah, January.
So for 2 years, it affects RTA 2. And we made
It is a
specific
risk.
promises to voters
Yes,
based on those presumptions.
yes,
So,
I understand that.
and the voters said, this is what we want exempted.
Okay,
I mean, it purchases of food for domestic home consumption. It was very clear
clear, yeah.
as to what we were talking about.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so the question, and this was discussed at CCI because it affects the municipalities and the counties as well that have exemptions. We have an exemption carve out for food, and as described and as defined by the county is this would be at supermarkets, but because they are changing the definition at the legislative level potentially, then our exclusion is expanded. And so it's not like we would have to vote to expand it. It automatically happens. And you're saying the math here is 12 to something. We're on a 1 cent tax as well. And I'm told it was 21 million, I thought, for the county, that this would affect the county dollars. So I'm not sure. And we're 1 cent as well. So I'm not sure what the real math is, but either ways, there's a presumption of you have been spending money on a certain amount and taking a cut, whether it's 12 million or 20 million dollars. And some of that, it's not like somebody mentioned, this isn't necessarily your Taco Bell. This is everything. So as a joke was made, but a lot of these are not, your standard subsistence. You could be going to the Star restaurant, the Broadmoor, and getting exempted, and people saying, well, this is just your basic food consumption at home. And it is totally, or I would say totally different. And so it's a concern if we're going to, shouldn't ask for it. I mean, I think maybe we should consider the carve out from the PPACG. I'm not on PPACG because it affects the municipalities. I would say not a carve out. They'd probably oppose it, but I'm not on a PPACG, but there's a lot of things to discuss here. But I would think that having the exemption pushed by us would make sense.
Now, I do think the one piece of good news is we do not have a Tabor spending cap in the RTA. Is that correct?
Correct. And no revenue cap.
No revenue cap. Yeah. So, whereas the county does have the Tabor's cap. Yeah. So, but it would be a reduction in our budget. So is anyone prepared to make, Commissioner Geithner?
Thanks. I did want to weigh in a little bit. I appreciate Randy's comment about, anytime we have a chance to reduce taxes, it's something that is very tempting, quite frankly. I have talked to the bill's sponsor on this one. And I said this at CCI, and I still feel this way now. While I understand the domestic home consumption piece, our world has changed a lot. And we have a lot of people going through a drive-through at Taco Bell or McDonald's, and that's because they're working and they're just trying to eat. And so while I understand the concept of the Broadmoor piece and how that is different, I don't necessarily think going to Taco Bell or McDonald's is much of a luxury today as maybe it was to many of us in the past. And so I'm a little more hesitant to say that we should just do a carve out when the intent of this bill is to help people who are struggling with those everyday costs. I would much prefer to try and continue to have a conversation with the bill sponsors about the concerns about potentially those high-end type meals and what we're really trying to get to personally. And I respectfully disagree with the characterization that this is just a restaurant bill. It's not. There are a lot of prepackaged foods in grocery stores that are taxed. And again, that might mean someone going in and trying to get easily prepared meals and quick things for families because they're working very hard to do other things. I certainly know as a family who has 2 working parents that sometimes it's just really tough and you have to do those things. And that's not a luxury. That's a trying to survive thing. So I'm very hesitant to say that I would characterize it that way. And I'm very hesitant to say that I would want a specific carve out. I think that I would be interested to continue to work with the bill sponsor. Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Commissioner Geithner. And you did get to speak to the sponsors. And I think we did bring this up as well during CCI. So that was something if we can get them to, like I said, not necessarily minimize, but come to some sort of compromise where that was one of the good ideas. I think I mentioned that as well, but Carrie did at CCI about, prepackaged food at restaurants in supermarkets, et cetera, grocery stores. That actually makes a lot of sense. So maybe there is some sort of compromise that we could work with them. I'd be open to that.
Okay, so as an organization, now we have 3 options on the table. There are a few statuses that Dan has to take in the legislature: support, monitor, amend, or oppose. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, ma'am.
So there has been no fiscal note produced for this yet. We do not know when a fiscal note will come out. Would we like to take the position of monitor for another month and risk it? I know there's a lot of, or do we want to go ahead and say, let's try to get the amendment in there? And Commissioner Geithner, if you have more comments, just speak up.
Commissioner, I would say that 2 of our 3 strategies are amend strategies, right? Either amend this out, exclude, make an amendment for prepackaged or food. So, I mean, 2, it looks like, or we leave it totally alone, which would be a monitor. So I think, that's the question, right? Is do we do nothing and just monitor it and take the hit if it passes? Or do we try to amend part of it or all of it?
City Councilman Williams, and then Rick, if you still would like to talk.
So I'm not a big fan of state control here. I think it ought to be local control. And look, if we as a body want to propose a change in our RTA, then we should do that. But I don't like the idea of the state taking action that affects what the voters of this community approved. And I am not in favor of the state overriding it. I recognize the state is in a very different situation than we are, because they are likely going to be over their tabor limit. So cutting, it's easy for them to cut because they have to cut anyways. It has actually no fiscal impact on the state at all because they can't keep the money anyways. Whereas the voters with the Pikes Peak RTA were very clear in saying that they wanted us to do that. So I would vote that we adopt an amend position. If we want to make changes in what we exempt, then we ought to do that at the local level and not at the state level.
Do we have a second?
I would second John Graham.
Okay, so
Madam Chair, could I just a clarification on this, if we could?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm okay with an amend position, but I think that the concern is that I'm not sure that I'm in agreement with the actual direction to amend. So is there a clarification? I mean, amend position is fine, but is there going to be some clarification on direction to Dan on this, or should I just assume that there will be something worked out down the road? How are we working that here?
Go ahead, Jennifer Ivy.
So I think hearing all the concerns here, if we literally imported the concept that I saw for additional language into the RTA statute, if that was imported into a carve out from the carve out, which essentially lets our governing body elect to exempt portions of this, I think that gives us the control that Councilmember Williams is talking about, but also would give us the leeway to pick or choose how we wanted to exempt items, which gets to Commissioner Geithner's concern, if I'm hearing things correctly.
I think that's correct from my perspective.
Okay, is that what you're saying in your motion, Wayne?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right.
We ought to make the decisions, not the folks in Denver.
Okay, so I think we have agreement on the motion, so I think we can call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have instruction to Dan to seek amendments on that one. And Jennifer Ivy has all of the language in her head ready to tell him.
Jennifer, I'll be looking for something from you because they already have your other one. So let me know when we have more
Yeah,
to
Dan,
give to them.
I think it's actually, if you just import that language into Title 39, I think we're there, but I will take a look once I have some drafting. I think we're already there, so.
And I will point out as this bill changes, Dan will keep an eye on it. And if he sends Rick an update, then we will go ahead and just send it out to the whole board. So that as things change, we can kind of keep an eye on it personally too.
Particularly if we get a fiscal note, because this would impact the state's sales tax revenue. And certainly they should come up with a percentage, whether it's 8%, 10%, 15%, whatever it is. It would help to know what the state's estimate is of the reduction of their revenue.
Yes, Councilmember Williams.
And I agree, it would help, but it wouldn't necessarily correspond exactly, because in Colorado Springs and I still believe El Paso County, the second largest source of revenue is from tourism. And so many of the people paying this tax are tourists. And so there are parts of the state where tourism is not as high a percentage. And so I think it probably affects us more than it does the state, simply because of our higher reliance on tourism. And that's an important part of this, right? Is, you know, John was talking about 3 times as many people being in Manitou during the summer, and they don't live there, so they're eating in the restaurants and other things, and they're helping to pay for the streetscape improvements that have been done on Manitou Avenue.
Absolutely. You've got that. You're right on target.
Rick.
So are we ready to move to the second bill, the 1055, House Bill 22-1055, which, as you can, I'll just read the title, concerning a sales and use tax exemption for essential hygiene products. We do not have a fiscal note out of Denver on this either. And Bev does not have the computer software tools to go on her access to the DOR website for us to be able to boil down a percentage reduction in our sales tax revenue for this. So we're blind on that. So I'll, I guess, turn it over to Dan for further explanation and then to see what the board's discussion is and what the board would like to decide on this bill.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Pretty much the same thing, different product. This one is a little trickier because we do not have nearly as accommodating bill sponsors to pretty much give us what we're looking for to make us happy. This one is going to come down, and the debate in committee will be about social justice and giving everybody a fair shot. In the House, there are 17 co-sponsors on the bill, all female. I expect that to grow. And in the Senate, there are 5 female co-sponsors of this bill for the hygiene products and for diapers. And the argument is going to be a fairness issue, making it affordable for everybody. But the exemptions and everything are exactly the same. Again, as Rick said, we just don't know, or I don't know what the fiscal impact is going to be on the RTA. I am pushing for a fiscal note. We're hoping we can back into a number for there. This bill's a little dicier because in many aspects, I believe this bill has a pretty good chance to get to the finish line in the governor's desk, where I'm not confident the other one does. So that's, I think, part of the calculus as well.
Yes, and this one also includes diapers for children.
Yep.
But not for adults. I just checked that. Go ahead, Wayne. Hey, come on. I'm going to be 15 years from now. We may have to talk about that.
So let me go back to the history of the RTAs, which is we were not trying to micromanage every single exemption. So you did not see all of the things listed. We did talk about food specifically, and we defined food for domestic home use. But every year the legislature plays with an exemption for this, an exemption for that, and this is pretty minuscule impact. Even when now there was a time, particularly because at least some of the time we had 2 kids in diapers at the same time, that there was might have been more of a significant impact, but in the overall scheme of things, I don't think this is that important to our economic well-being as a entity. And I think this is the kind of thing that we intended when we created the RTA, to kind of roll with whatever the exemptions are. So I think the right position is a monitor on this one.
I would second that thinking.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further comments on this?
None at all over here,
Okay, good.
from my view.
Anyone online? Okay, and everybody in favor of just monitoring this bill, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. So I think we've given Dan his marching instructions. If anything crazy comes up, we will certainly be notified. And certainly as we get to the end of the session, we'll keep track of Rick and I will keep track of what's going on a little closer, as we get more bills dropping and heard.
Bet.
I actually don't know if that. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Now we are up to Pikes Peak RTA member announcements. Randy, or I should say, does anyone have any? Oh, Gail has one. 4.
Can't turn the mic on, so they're not that important. Oh, there we go. They actually are all going to be quick. I wanted to let you know that the city is likely going to be pursuing a raise grant for the UPR bridges over Fontanero again. We're going to repackage that, and there is additional funding in that. So in March, I will be bringing a request for a letter of support for PPRTA for that project. I wanted to let you know, I think if some of you were able to attend the box culvert or bridge placement at the Airport Road Bridge project over Spring Creek, thank you for coming, one. But if you were unable to attend, there is a time-lapse video of that placement available on the city's website. So you could go under Engage COS and look at the projects if you wanted to be able to see that. The city has been working with a CTAB, or the Citizen Transportation Advisory Board, where we are getting scores on potential PPRTA projects, and we will start bringing those forward. We're planning on bringing an initial lift to City Council on March 7th and likely bringing it to PPRTA in the May timeframe, depending on the direction that we get in that. And then I will mention one last thing. We received notice from Colorado Springs Utilities this past week or last week about some very serious supply chain concerns. Think of utilities, well, what does that have to do with transportation? As you're all aware, we have a lot of underground utilities that have to happen, either relocations, conflict resolution, and sometimes the utility needs to go and do an enhancement underneath the road before the road projects. So we're seriously evaluating the schedule impacts. Just want to let you know whether we are modifying the start and stop date for the projects or just extending the overall duration for the contracts to allow contractors to be able to get those materials to incorporate into the work. So those were the 4 things I had from Colorado Springs.
Okay, all very important. Does anyone have any further comments?
Is this Yolanda?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Yolanda.
By the way, Holly, I think you're doing a great job, and I love your sense of humor. And you
Thank
carry
you.
us right along. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I was able to attend that when they were putting in those huge 50,000-pound blocks in there, and it was pretty cool. If you'd like, I could send you the link of the news coverage that was received. And at that time, Puma had little booties and a hard hat and a jacket. When we attended the event, it was quite spectacular. On the news clip, we talked about PPRTA 3, and so it was really good news for PPRTA.
Well, now you have to send us new news clips because Puma was wearing a hard hat.
Oh, well, he wasn't in the news clip. They kind of leave him out of that, but I did a video of it, so
Oh, how cute.
I'll send you that. Okay.
All right, yes. What?
I do have one alibi.
Oh, okay, and Randy has an alibi.
So it reminded me when you talked about the bridges. Last week I had a chance to get a tour of the Powers Research Overpass. So they're doing a great job. They're ahead of schedule. I think the public schedule is to be finished by November. And yes, it will be done by this November. So we can look forward to that.
Yes, I drive through that once a month to see how it's going. So that's very exciting. All right, I think we might be done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
Hey, good. Obviously, it's a better job than last year.